this your first time in Seaford?
No, not my first time.
In this building?
In this building, yes.
Okay.
Hopefully not the last time.
Hopefully not. Welcome to Conversations with Kelly, where we sit down with business people across the state to discuss issues that are at the forefront of the business community. I'm Kelly Basil with the Delaware State Chamber of Commerce, and today we're talking about site readiness. With me, I have Shane Breakie, who's with Chesapeake Utilities, and I also have Trisha Newcomer with the City of Seaford. We'll start off with Shane, if you want to just tell us who you are, what you do, and what Chesapeake Utilities does.
Sure, Kelly. Thanks for having me here. Nice to meet you, Trisha. Shane Breakie, Chesapeake Utilities. I'm the Vice President of Environmental Sustainability and Organic Growth. It's a long title, but in essence, I oversee economic development, but then doing it in an environmentally conscious way. And I've been with the company for going on 30 years. I've had all different aspects within the company, from accounting to customer service to operations, and now I'm on the sustainability side. And been a very strong advocate for supporting the growth in Delaware and the local economic development offices, such as here in Seaford and the county and the state of Delaware.
And are you originally from Delaware?
I'd like to say yes, but being from, my dad was in the military, and as many people are, they moved to Delaware because of the Dover Air Force Base, but Delaware has a way of keeping you here. And so I was one of those kids who was like, well, I'm not going to go to college in Delaware, and I'm not going to live in Delaware. I went to college in Delaware, and I haven't left Delaware. So I call myself a Delawarean, but I was born in South Dakota, and I've lived in 3 different countries, but we settled here. Delaware has a way of sucking you in.
So we can't ask you the high school question, but you seem very Delawarean.
No, I went to Caesar Rodney.
Oh, there we go. So that's Delaware enough.
Yeah, I'm a proud rider. So,
Trisha, tell us about yourself and what you do.
Sure. So I'm Trisha Newcomer. I'm with the City of Seaford. I am the Director of Economic Development and Community Relations. That sort of encompasses a lot of things. The main role is being that business liaison for the business folks that are here, working with other partners such as Chesapeake Utilities, really sort of being that intermediary to cut through some of that red tape for them. And not just the new businesses, but our existing business culture. We really want to make sure that they know that we're here to support them as well. And then through the community relations side, just being that advocate for Seaford. I've been here with the city for 24 years, having various roles. So I 100% believe in this community. I am a Seaford native, grew up here in Seaford, graduated from Seaford High School. So I've seen Seaford through all of the good, all of the bad, and we are really starting to move the needle on some successful things here, and it's exciting to be part of. When you have grown up in a place and you have a position that gives back, it's almost like giving back to a community that you grew up in and helped raise you. So it's definitely a passion project more than it is a job.
That's really awesome.
Yeah.
And one of the reasons why we're here in Seaford City Hall today. So thanks for having us.
Thanks for being here. We're happy to have you.
And there's a lot of activity going on in Seaford, a lot of development projects, again, which is why we really wanted to come here today to talk about site readiness. But let's back up straight to the beginning. Site readiness, I think there's a lot of people that don't necessarily understand exactly what that means. So let's dumb it down and start from the beginning. What is site readiness? And I ask it to both of you. I'd love to hear both answers.
I'll let Trisha go first. I'm sure she's got it down pat.
So for us, and I say this a lot to anybody that will listen to me really, is site readiness is time is money for these businesses. We get a lot of times we'll get alerts from Delaware Prosperity Partnerships, or we get just the general call, and a person or a business is looking for something that they either want to expand or they want to start a new business, and really they have their business plan and they know what they need to do to survive, and sometimes that 2-year window of having to go through all the approvals, all of the infrastructure put in the ground and all of that really tends to change their mind. No, I don't want to locate here in this community or anywhere in Delaware if it's not ready for me. So site readiness is really taking that site, minimizing the amount of time, and when you say site ready, you want all of the infrastructure ready to roll. So pretty much all they have to do is get their necessary approvals for the building and making that happen, not all of the rest of the stuff that comes along with it.
Yeah, and then it's, she was saying earlier about the partnership. It's just making sure, you're communicating amongst all the different groups to bring it all together, because site readiness is very broad. It could be from utilities to road to permitting to air permitting to site permitting to zoning, whatever. So there's a lot that needs to be done, and so having those things out of the way, or shortening the processes, or having somebody as a liaison that can walk you through the processes means a lot. And I'll use one example. So our company's been in Delaware for over 160 years. We were started in Dover, and we outgrew our Dover facility. We came to that determination like 4 or 5 years ago, and we wanted to stay in Delaware because we do have operations in Florida too. And we did want to stay in Kent County, but at the time there wasn't a lot of opportunity. So we had to start looking elsewhere, which would have been painful. But then we did find a location where we did relocate to that was site ready and was one of the last ones in the county. And that helped us to, stay in this region. But if not, who knows what would have happened.
It would have been a huge loss for Delaware.
Yeah.
You're a very big company.
Yeah.
And you do a lot for the state.
It would have been a big loss for me too, because I wasn't ready to move.
You weren't ready to move.
No.
And I think a lot of what goes into actually making it site ready is the networking. You really have to know who's at Chesapeake Utilities from a municipality perspective. Who's at Chesapeake Utilities? Who's at the state? What agencies do I need? And we try, from the city perspective, to try to really bring everybody, coalesce them all together at one time when somebody's coming in, and really shorten that window as best we can. But if you kind of just sat in your own silos, never reached out and had preliminary conversations, it makes it much more difficult. I know we had some conversations before we started on our Western Sussex Business Campus. We just talked about it a little bit, and we'd had preliminary conversations with Chesapeake Utilities. And so I think once that ball started rolling, that made it a lot easier. Oh yeah, they were familiar with what we were going to do, and we were able to move the needle a little faster.
I'm curious, how do you make those kinds of connections, whether you're a business from the outside coming in or a company that wants to get in on a project? How do you make those connections? Who do you talk to? What are the resources?
I mean, one of the biggest things from our perspective, and we champion it here more on a local level, but it's chambers. State Chamber does an amazing job of being able to coalesce a bunch of business folks in the room, and that's where conversations start. That's where you at least can put a face with a name, that if I need to have something to call, I know who I'm calling. We really try to drive our business community here in Seaford to our chamber, because there's many people that they're like, how do I get the word out? How do I start letting people know? I'm like, you've got a ton of folks that are ready to help you, actually. You just need to be not afraid to jump in, honestly.
And the good thing about Delaware is, they always talk about the 6 degrees of separation. Delaware's only got 3. So I'm sure you could throw out 2 names and I could figure out, exactly who you are and what your family did and everything.
Probably one of us are related.
Yeah, probably. But it comes down to, because it's a small state and there's a lot of good positive relationships and interaction. You have your state chambers, you have your local chambers, you have your state economic development, you have your county economic development, you have your municipality economic development, and you just got to maintain those relationships with each, and that's what happens in Delaware. Everybody interacts and communicates.
That's great. So going back to the projects in Seaford, can you fill us in on what's going on here?
Absolutely. So we have a tract of land. It was about 115 acres tract of land that we have owned since the late 90s. We've always had plans of adding it to the stock of our already existing business parks. We have an industrial park and a business park already. We've had numerous folks come in and we've said, we've got land available, we've got everything you need, we can supply the water, sewer, electric, those sort of things. But none of that was in the ground. So, as I mentioned earlier, folks would just walk away from the table because it didn't meet their timelines. We have a very business-focused city council and very forward-thinking city council, which we're fortunate to have. And they made the decision a few years ago, we really need to be shovel-ready. And so we had a partnership with the city, Sussex County, the state of Delaware. We were able to coalesce funds to start that project. And so we're just about to complete phase 1, which is the water, sewer, roadway infrastructure necessary to make that happen. And we now have a contract with a developer. They've purchased 4 lots in the business campus, which is great. And they are going through the plans now for 2 70,000 square foot buildings.
Wow.
So it's been a whirlwind to see. You know, you've worked so many years to try to make something happen, and to finally see that come to fruition is huge. But at the same time, since we started the project, it just seems like it's going so fast. So we're excited to see that first business get in there and get open. And it's a win for Seaford, but it's really a win for this region because it's going to provide a ton of job opportunities.
Absolutely.
Not just to Seaford residents, but anyone in the surrounding region, not even just Delaware, but, you know, we're neighbors to the west is Maryland. So we'll have many of those folks come here.
And what is your role in these projects as a utilities company?
So, I mean, I've got a couple roles, but one, I'm from Delaware, so I care about this stuff, and the employees of Chesapeake Utilities are from this region, and we want to see things happening in a positive manner. So, you know, we're all bought into everything that's happening with Seaford and everywhere else. But so my role is to ensure that we, as the energy provider, on the natural gas side, have the infrastructure in place. You know, and there was a point probably 10, 15 years ago that we weren't prevalent within Sussex County. Our infrastructure did come through Seaford, but we didn't have much infrastructure on the eastern side, like Selbyville, Millsboro. And so over the last 10 years, we've been really expanding our efforts to get gas throughout its entirety of Sussex County and the state of Delaware, so that, you know, that's no longer an item that people can't check off the list. And so I help to facilitate that process.
What other items are on the list that a business is looking for to consider a site, you know, move-in ready?
Well, when we receive alerts, a lot of times there's, you know, you're looking for capacity for sewer, for some of those, just water capacity, electric capacity. High-speed internet is a big one. Some are specific, very specific, that they want natural gas. It just varies on who the business is that's looking, and so you don't necessarily always get it right. But if you have, at minimum, the basics of those things, you can build it out from there.
Yeah, and some will push the envelope and say, I want rail, or I
Right.
want access to the highway. You know, I want an interchange.
It'll be hard to build another railroad.
Yeah, exactly. So it can be broad, but
Yeah, and from the southern Delaware perspective, a lot of times we get taken out of the equation early on because they want to be close to 95. So, but, you know, we also do things differently down here. So,
And that's one of your selling points too. I mean, you're not meant to be a Wilmington.
right.
So I'm curious, what are, and you can talk about this from Seaford's standpoint, and if you want to answer it more regionally or statewide, but I'll ask you kind of a 2-part question. What are some strengths that Delaware has on this topic already, and what are some of the things that we can work on?
I'll say the strengths are, again, because of its size and relationships. I mean, you can get to the whatever level you need. You can get to the governor, and he can help pass, you know, some grant funding to help support something like that. And then, you know, just the relationship side is definitely strong. But then there are, on the other side, things that we can always improve on is just how can we shorten that process? You know, what are the road bumps and the red tape that we need to address? And so there are other agencies that you have to deal with, and we need to make sure that they work in parallel, not in a series, to get things done. You know, because sometimes if you got to wait for one group to get their thing done before you move to the next, that just adds to the timeline. So you got to get everybody kind of working together, which isn't always done that way.
Can you share an example of a time where you kind of ran into this red tape?
Oh, I bet you can, the better. But I mean, there's always we work with builders, developers quite a bit on the residential side. And quite often you'll hear the concerns about the Del Dot entryway or the Del Dot road widenings and things of that nature, trying to get those items approved. And those can be hurdles. And I hate to, mention one group without mentioning another, but I mean, that's just an example of one.
Sure.
Yeah, and that's sort of what we try to do when I say we embrace the business. We'll walk the process with them. So if they do run into those hurdles with a particular agency, we'll be at the table with them. Because for Seaford, what may seem like a minor business, minor retail business, for Seaford is a big deal. Whereas Wilmington, Middletown, it's not such a big deal. It's a perception thing sometimes for Southern Delaware. You have certain things and your community has arrived, and it kind of gets lost. And so we've been to the table many times to try to help smooth out, because often developers, particularly the new ones, you have your seasoned developers that 100% know the process, but those that are just putting their toe in the water, they really don't know, and just to have somebody that will come alongside of them and help them through the process. And that's really where we try to operate in that space.
Getting back to my question, I feel like that's a real strength of Seaford, because there are so many areas that you have to go through in order to get a project done. Right. To have someone along the way and kind of guide you through that process is huge.
Yeah, and again, it goes back to, and Shane alluded to it as well, is the relationships, whether it's in a state agency or I have a significantly good relationship with a lot of the communities around us. We joke a lot of times, everybody seems to think we're competitors, and we're really not. We all want to see good things land in our community. That's 100% how we are, but at the same time, we also understand in Sussex County that their win or our win is a win for the county, which is ultimately a win for the state. So we do work really well together.
That's great. Yeah. That's really good to hear. Shoot, I just lost my train of thought. That happens.
There's no bug in your ear telling you what to say?
No.
I would say, if you want to go back to some of the weaknesses, again, is the time that it takes to make some of these things happen. And we're seeing some changes throughout the state that are really starting to shorten that time frame. Probably not as fast as we all hope. I think today's day and age, we're all very instant gratification. You know what I mean? When you have the internet and everything, Amazon can have stuff to you within a couple hours usually. So we think everything should happen in that time frame. It doesn't always. It shouldn't.
Well, that's an interesting
thing.
Frame, people have become more impatient as technology's kind of seeped into our lives. And you mentioned 6 months or the Ready in 6 initiative. That's kind of one of their big things about moving project forward is, what was it? I want to say 2018, the State Chamber had our Developing Delaware conference and brought in site selectors. And they mentioned that Delaware was taking about 24 months to move through a project, and that kind of the industry gold standard is 6 months. And so how can we get there? Yeah. Do you think that the states in the last few years has kind of worked closer to that? Is there things that you can cite that have made processes easier?
I can't come up with one particular process. I know that there is an eye to minimizing that time. I know from our perspective in conversations with some of our legislators, they get it, they see it. We try to work very closely with our local elected and state legislators to really keep them in the loop on what's going on, what the process is, so that they kind of have an idea when they're making those decisions. There have been some things, I can't necessarily pull out one particular thing that's gone faster, but we're having the conversation, which is something we haven't had.
And it starts with and it starts with the conversation, and then we got to start progressing from there. But one thing that has changed is that there has been more funding available to support these initiatives, and that wasn't always there.
That was my question. You mentioned funding. Okay. Sorry, keep going. Keep going with that.
Stealing your show.
No, but I mean, so I think through these conversations about the time, there's also been the conversations about the need in general. And so I think one of the items they realize they can fix quickly is to have money available to help support site readiness.
Sure.
And so there's, from the government's outlay to some, local municipalities and the county have been putting out additional funding. So I think that's helped quite a bit as well.
And that is a huge win that the governor kind of put his eye on that. This past year, the Site Readiness Fund, it was its first year in existence, and it had $10 million funded towards it. I think they spent almost all of it. They had a slew of applications that they were able to fund projects. And I know the state has funded it again for next year, another $10 million. Is that something that you think the city would take advantage of?
Absolutely. I think it's huge because for so long there was infrastructure monies available for development, for developers, but municipalities really couldn't access that. So when you think about it in terms of our business campus, we really needed to have the developer come along to buy the property, then make it site ready. Where now, because of some of these funds, the Site Readiness, we actually were able to secure some funding through the Transportation Infrastructure Fund, TIF funds. And because of those opportunities, we're able to take and do some of this work so that, if Shane decided he wanted to come and build, we're ready. All you got to do is your site work and what you need to get yourself up and running.
And these are really long-term investments.
Sure.
I mean, this is money that's going towards something that's going to be there for the next 50 years. So it's well-spent money.
And they're also, putting eyes on buildings that could be repurposed or sites that can be built up because, people like Kurt Foreman who are trying to bring companies here or help companies relocate because they're growing. He needs a Rolodex of, I can't believe I used the word Rolodex.
Have you ever seen one?
I have not.
Okay.
A Rolodex of options of sites that he can say, oh yeah, this is what you're looking for. I've got one right here in Sussex County. Let's go take a look at it. And so that's really what we're working towards is giving businesses options.
Yeah, and I think that's the other good thing about Delaware is, it's a very diverse state. And so we can cater to the finance side, to the warehousing side, to the agricultural side, to the retirement side, and so we have I'm gonna say Rolodex, but a potpourri of, options out there for, whoever it is that's coming into this area.
Well, I'm curious, are there any specific industry or industries that you're seeing a lot of activity from right now?
Not necessarily one specific industry that I've seen. What I have seen, particularly since the pandemic, is now that there's a lot of more individuals working from home, there's a much stronger demand for high-speed internet. I think we're seeing folks that worked and lived in the cities moving to places like Sussex County to be closer to the beach, yet can still work for the large corporation as long as they can do it from home, but they need that internet access.
That's an interesting point you make. I know that's another priority of the governor's right now is making Delaware the first state to have universal broadband.
Yes.
Which is really cool. First state and first state. And Delaware is already one of the most wired states right now. But to your point, there are still pockets geographically that just don't have it.
I actually live in one of those pockets.
Do you?
Yes.
I cannot imagine not having access to the internet.
Yeah. I don't have. Yeah, we have broadband access, very, very limited. But yeah. So it is a big deal.
So some of the industries we've seen a lot of interest in are the warehousing. You see that throughout, but also we've seen a lot of inquiries about agricultural around like greenhouse building and aquaculture of fish farming. We've seen a lot of interest in those categories here on the Delmarva Peninsula. And so the nice thing about those two markets is that on the warehousing side and the logistics side, from the jobs perspective, you have Dover Air Force Base. That's actually a good pool of resources of retirees that can come help on the logistics side. And then on the agricultural side, we have it's an agricultural society down here that really can help support that industry as well.
And I think we've seen, unfortunately, with the pandemic, how having access to some of the agricultural products has been a challenge in some areas. So I think you are going to see more of those large facilities that will come in and do aquaculture and some of those type things.
Yeah, I think these supply side hurdles are going to create opportunities for local establishments to be able to, grow things locally, build things locally. I think it's shown that our dependence on products from overseas is going to hurt us in the long run. So you're going to start to see a lot more domestic manufacturing and growing going on.
Well, so I'm going to transition a little bit based on that point. It is great to kind of bring all that back here and make it local again, but do we have the workforce to support it?
We're fortunate here in that when you don't necessarily have the skilled workforce, we have a really good relationship with Sussex Tech and Delaware Tech. Delaware Tech has a phenomenal workforce training program where they'll work with the existing business to see what the needs are and what curriculum needs to be established, and that's been huge. I know we have a logistics company here in Seaford that they actually have crafted a certificate program based around logistics, based on their very specific needs. So that for us is huge. We try to sell that to any business that's existing or coming to the area, that if you're missing something or if there's a special skill, and I know Sussex Tech's doing a phenomenal job with their adult program. There's a lot of demand for skilled laborers right now.
Huge demand.
Welders, I think, is one of the biggest ones that there's such a shortage for, and so they're really trying to wrap their arms around that training and making that happen.
That's great, and I feel like they're implementing these programs now at like record rates. Yeah. Which is really cool to see.
Yeah.
And even starting back too in kind of high school and encouraging the trades earlier is really nice. So not only is it upskilling people, but we're also encouraging the next generation that these are great careers.
Well, we have, our local high school is really trying to work with the business community to have some of the high school students get out into the community.
As a co-op?
Sort of, just to kind of see what's out there. We actually partnered with the school district and had a high school intern. We had two different high school interns. One actually ended up coming to work for the city. So it really helps students, even if it's not just Seaford, just in general, to realize, you mentioned you weren't going to come back to Delaware, you weren't going to go into school in Delaware, but when you really find out what the landscape is and that you could do certain type jobs, making certain amount of money, sometimes I think what they don't know, and they just got to know they got to go off and go somewhere else so they can make better money when there are good paying jobs they're just not aware of.
I have to give a quick shameless plug. Exactly what you're describing is why we have a program at the Chamber called Intern Delaware, and it is designed to help businesses show off the opportunities that not only they offer, but the state offers. So it encourages people coming out of college to either stay here because they're from here, or maybe they're going to the University of Delaware and they're an out-of-state student and thinking about Delaware as an option after college.
Right.
And so that is exactly what we do, is we expose them to all sorts of different professional development programming, volunteering, there's social gatherings, and we really kind of sell them on the culture of the state.
I think many of us, myself particularly, you had all these ideas of what I'm going to be when I grow up, and you grow up and sometimes that's not really what you want to be and you just don't know. And so exposing kids young enough to all different kinds of avenues, beyond just the doctor, the lawyer, the teacher, I don't want to call them basic careers because they're not basic careers, but you know what I mean, that where most people land. And I think really exposing them to a landscape that's so much more vast really helps us in the long run.
Yeah, we have 2 employees. One's in our IT department, one was in marketing, and they've been with the company for 2 years, but we brought them in as interns when they were just seniors out of Polytech. And so they wound up being interns for us for 4 years through college. And now they've been employees for 2 years. So when you say they've only been employees for 2 years, they've actually been employees for 6 years, and you forget about it. But anyways, you foster that relationship, and then they get to see the value of the company, and then they wind up most people, once they see what's out there, they wind up staying because they feel more comfortable with it. And so you just got to educate them of what the options are.
Definitely. And I went through Leadership Delaware a few years ago,
Yep.
and is it Michael McMasters,
Yeah.
your former CEO?
Yes.
He was an intern, went all the way up to CEO in your company, and he was a speaker in our program, and that was a very powerful story.
Yeah, so I've been with the company probably, so I said almost 30 years, like 28 years, and there's probably half the company's been there longer than me. You know, we had a gentleman that just retired with 50 plus years of service with the company.
I feel like you don't hear that anymore.
Right.
No,
Right.
no. So,
Right, you
so it's a matter of, but again, just trying to get that conversation going with these people to get them to realize, what's here, who we are. That's the toughest part, is how do you get to them early, and having these internship type programs is a great way to do it.
And you mentioned, Leadership Delaware, being an LDI alum myself. You have this preconceived notion. I've lived here all my life. I know Delaware.
Yeah.
And you go through a program such as
Completely
Leadership Delaware,
eye-opening.
and you come to find out that you know nothing. So it's that same concept of, well, we all know when we were in high school, we knew everything, right? So they know what they know, and they don't want to hear, but to be able to expose them to things, it's huge.
Yeah, so I was the past chair for the Central Delaware Chamber of Commerce, and went through the Leadership Central Delaware program probably 15, 20 years ago. Again, same thing. I thought I knew Kent County, which is where this program is, but then you get to go through and see Craft or the Dover Air Force Base or some of the schools, and it's like I had no idea.
There are
Right.
businesses you ride by on a
Oh,
daily
yeah,
basis, and you're like,
Playtex
they just make widgets.
Yeah.
Then you get in there and you find out, okay, they make widgets, but it's this whole scientific process to make that happen, and
Oh, yeah.
it's such an eye-opening experience.
When I like to brag about Delaware to non-Delawareans who might not know where we are on the map, I love telling them that ILC Dover makes spacesuits here. It's
Right?
one of my fun
Yes.
facts about Delaware. So.
Exactly.
But getting back to site readiness, we actually are almost out of time, so I wanted to ask you all one last question, and it's going to be kind of a big thinking question. If you had one recommendation of something that we could do as a state or on a more local level, what could be done to make site readiness an easier process, get it done faster so that we do have that Rolodex of options?
Good question.
I mean, I don't know what a single solution is, but I think we need to be honest and open with how well we're doing. And so let's say we have a goal to get to 6 months. We should be reporting on how well each of our different areas is doing to accomplish that. And that way, if we start to see, oh yeah, it's 24 months here, and then we can start to really pinpoint what the real problems are. But we don't really have that database that says, all right,
Right.
how long are these things taking, and what are the hurdles for each one? And we need to kind of have that, and then we can all get on the same page and say, all right, well, here's a common problem. Let's focus on that as a team. It's got to start from the state level and work its way down, and how can we address it that way?
Yeah, and I would piggyback on that and say probably one of the things we are having the conversation, but probably one of the things that through this process, we should do is maybe not have just the conversation with the state, because they have their knowledge of how things work, and then you transition that into a process, and there's hurdles. So if you really involve developers, you involve companies like Chesapeake Utilities, municipalities, those sort of things, and really come up with a plan collectively, I think that will be able to make us have ready in 6.
And I'm sorry, I said that was my last question,
That's okay.
but I do actually have one more. Because based on that, there was some activity this past year in the legislature, and they did have a couple bills that sort of had to do with this. One being about temporary entrance permits, and another about kind of modifying the PLUS process for economic development projects. What does that mean for what both of you do? Does it help?
To me, it shows that they're talking about it.
Yeah.
And I think that means that, all right, somebody identified those two things as hurdles, and so we're addressing those. So to me, it's a great start.
Recognizing that there is a problem is probably the first step, anything that we can do to minimize time for us or for you or for a developer to be able to make things happen. And so you have a business open and you have people going to work, making money and providing for their family. That's key.
And as you both said, this is a long and complicated process, so it involves a lot of people and a lot of conversations to get us there. And as you said, we're on the way and we're starting. And so I want to thank you both for also being a part of that today, and being a part of the conversation, how we can do better and be better. So thank you both for joining. If our listeners did want to get in contact with you, how could they reach you, Shane?
You can call me on my cell phone.
Whoa, you're going to give out your cell phone.
Or just go to chpk.com, and there's a section there for economic development, and you'll see my picture, and you can just click on that, and it'll email me.
Perfect.
Yep. They can call here at the city office, or they can reach me by email or go to www.seafordde.com.
Great.
We've got a section on economic development as well.
Wonderful. And you can always reach out to me at the chamber. It's kbasil@dscc.com. You can find us on our website, www.dscc.com, Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn. You can reach us just about anywhere. If you have a suggestion for another topic of these in the future, we're all ears. And thank you again for joining us. I hope you have a great day.
Thank you
Thank
for
you.
having us.